A Nairobi waitress gave her staff meal to a blind stranger outside a café and got fired for it. Earlier that same day, he had turned his face to the sound of her steps and whispered her name, though she had never told him. By the next morning, 3 black Range Rovers idled at the curb asking for her by name. Who was he, and how did he know? Phones would soon light up. #KOT would argue, and a quiet speech in a golden ballroom would make a city stop breathing. But before the headlines, there was only a tired girl with her mother's cross warm against her skin, a cracked walking stick tapping the curb, and a decision that would travel farther than she could walk in a week. If you've ever wondered whether one small kindness matters when no one is watching, stay close. This story begins on a hot noon outside Java House in Westlands, where a cup of hot chai changed everything. African Karma Stories. Westlands at noon glitters. Glass towers throwing sun onto polished shoes. Coffee foam blooming behind the windows of Java House. On the pavement outside, a man with a cracked walking stick feels for the curb with careful taps, head tilted toward a light he cannot see. People slide around him, wrinkle noses, and hurry on. They call him Zekipofu, the blind old man. A security guard frowns. A couple mutters, "This smell, eh?" But he stands there, patient, palm open, listening to a world that rarely listens back. From the doorway, Grace Wanjiru steps into the heat. Her uniform is clean, but tired at the seams. Her braids are neat, her smile is small and real. A tray rests on her hip, the sweet scent of mandazi and chai rising like a promise. She hesitates, glances at the supervisor's glassy stare inside, then walks to the man. "Pole sana," she says softly. "I know hunger." She presses a warm paper cup into his hand and slips a mandazi into the other. "Take this." His lips tremble. "Asante sana mtoto. Mungu akubariki." "Thank you, child. God bless you." Maybe you've passed a person like him today, eyes fixed on your phone, telling yourself you're late. Nairobi moves fast. Kindness often doesn't. Inside, a few customers watch. One shakes his head, another records on his phone for reasons even he can't name. Grace hums a line of a gospel chorus and turns back to work. Before Westlands and coffee cups, Grace's story begins on the Nairobi-Mombasa highway in 2017. A night bus, rain, a radio prayer, then sirens. Her parents never came home. In Machakos, the church women tied headscarves and sang low. Aunt Njeri took her in and said, "Tutajaribu, we will try." A small cross from her mother rested against her chest. She wears it still. In Kibera, tin roofs pop in the noon heat, and the railway line cuts like a crooked punctuation mark. Grace wakes at 4, heats water in a dented sufuria, and hums "Mungu ni mwema," God is good. She leaves before dawn, walking the tracks to save matatu fare, counting coins with her thumb, fare, githeri, airtime, rent. Maybe you've done this math too, deciding which hunger can wait. Her brother Samuel is 16 and brilliant, but sickle cell does not negotiate. Kenyatta National Hospital smells of bleach and patience. Blood banks run low. Nurses say pole and mean it. On payday, she opens M-Pesa and sends half her salary home. Transaction successful. Wallet thin, heart a little lighter. She dreams of him in a white coat, laughing in a bright ward that does not echo. At Java House, the trays are heavy, the smiles heavier. Margaret's heels click like a metronome of warnings. Move faster, Grace. Wacha ujinga. Stop the nonsense. Only Mama Asha slips her a warm plate and a glance that says, I see you. Grace tucks the cross beneath her collar, straightens, and keeps humming. She has learned to make room for Grace inside a crowded day. Between Kibera dust and Westlands glass, her steps stitch two worlds together. Every morning is the same choice, keep or give. And every evening, the same prayer, Lord, make me useful. She doesn't know that a stranger is already listening for that prayer. Tomorrow, a small decision outside a coffee shop will bend her life towards a door she never knew existed. Maybe you've stood at such a door, hand on the handle, not knowing it was yours. The city was about to turn its face towards her finally.
The lunch rush hits like a matatu at full speed. Orders back, cups hiss, tilts chop. Grace moves through it like a quiet river, tray held high, braids pinned, a hymn under her breath. Outside the glass, the blind stranger waits in the slice of shade. The cracked stick hangs from his wrist, but his back stays straight, like an old teacher taking attendance of footsteps. She slips a mandazi into a serviette and pours chai through the foam crowns. Mzee, chai na kidogo tamu? She whispers. He lifts his face before she speaks, as if he already knew her steps. Karibu binti, he replies, the vowels round and crisp. Not quite Kibera, not quite Westlands either. Margaret's reflection flashes in the window. Grace, heels, perfume, a tight smile. What did I say? He is your hotel ya mama yako. If you want to donate food, do it from your salary. A couple smirks. A guard pretends not to hear. Grace nods, swallows, and still lowers the cup into the man's hands. He grips it carefully, testing the heat with a knuckle. You carry the weight lightly, he says softly. Most people learn that after 40. You, before 25. The line lands strange in her chest. Who talks like that on a sidewalk? Inside, Mama Asha catches Grace's eye and slides a plate toward the pass with a small secret tilt. Peter, the Safaricom guy at table 4, pretends to check his phone while recording a few seconds he can't explain, saving. Maybe you've had a boss's voice in your ear and a conscience in your chest, both loud. In the end, only one leads you home. Grace turns to go. Behind her, the stranger taps the cracked stick once, then stands without wobbling at all. She notices and keeps walking. Tomorrow, that detail will not let her sleep. By Wednesday, the calendar felt heavy in Grace's pocket, even though it was only paper. Rent week was coming. Samuel's last transfusion receipt hid behind her mother's cross in the tin box at home, whispering more numbers than prayers. Matatu fares had jumped again, so she had walked the railway line at dawn, shoes dusted red, stomach already arguing. The lunch rush began early, the espresso machine hissing like rain on a tin roof, and Margaret's heels counting out the seconds she was allowed to breathe. Maybe you know that drumbeat. Bills, duty, and a smile you have to wear. Outside, the blind stranger waited in his narrow stripe of shade. A guard nudged him with 2 fingers, like he was a signboard to be straightened. Move a bit, mse. Inside, a customer waved a hand impatiently. Excuse me, waitress. Grace's tray trembled, then stilled. On the pass, a fresh plate of samosas steamed beside a staff mug of chai that Mama Asha had saved for her. To take either out would be to invite trouble. To do nothing would be to invite another kind of trouble she felt in her chest. She chose. Grace lifted the staff mug, set it next to the samosas, and slipped through the door with a breath that tasted like courage. Mse, pole, kunywa na ukule kidogo, she said. Drink and eat a little. She pressed the warm cup into his hand and broke a samosa into halves so it would cool faster. Her own lunch evaporated in that moment, a quiet surrender no one would see.
Hunger will make itself known later. For now, the kindness would do the talking. He bowed his head like a worshipper. Some tea is poured from kettles, and some from the heart. Only one truly warms. He turned the cup, aligning the lid with a learned precision. You carry a song in you, child. Hold it. Grace felt the words settle, too polished for a sidewalk. A shadow cut the light. Margaret. Grace, are you mad? Perfume, heat, you embarrass us. Customers can see you feeding every Tom, Dick, and beggar. He is your charity. Return those items and stop these theatrics. Two men at a table chuckled. Another woman made a face and whispered, so unprofessional. The guard looked away. Grace steadied the tray and said nothing. The man held his cup like a small fire against the wind. Margaret leaned in. Last warning. If you want to be Mother Teresa, do it elsewhere. She snatched the empty saucer and hissed, "You'll pay for this." The blind man lifted his face toward the sound. "Madame," he said calmly, "one day you will stand where you cannot see who is watching." She scoffed, spun on her heel, and marched inside. Grace took a breath and added one more mandazi from her pocket, the last of her coins spent earlier that morning. She didn't know it yet, but the echo of that calm voice would follow her into a colder evening where the cost of kindness would climb.
Evening folded over Westlands like a blue shawl, and the wind of the hills found every gap in a person's clothing. The glass towers blinked awake, traffic lights glowed, and the sidewalk hardened into a current of cold faces. Grace stepped outside with the trash run, hugged her thin sweater to her chest, and saw him where the light ended, hands tucked in, shoulders trembling. She knew that kind of cold, the one that sneaks through fabric and faith. She set the bin aside and crossed the small distance that always feels longer when people are watching. "Baridi leo mzee," she said. "Cold today, mzee." He smiled without seeing. "Ndio binti, but I have known worse winters." His voice held a strange steadiness, as if the wind answered to him. Grace glanced back through the glass. Co-workers moved like metronomes, and Margaret's silhouette tilted toward a customer, laughing with too many teeth. Grace exhaled, unthreaded her sweater from her shoulders, and wrapped it around the old man's back, careful with the sleeves. "Hii ikue yako kwa leo," she murmured. "Let this be yours for today." The knit was thin, but his shiver slowed. A man in a fitted shirt snorted as he passed. Ati, "Waitress ana roho ya huruma. Kesho ataolewa na maskini." So the waitress has a heart of mercy. Tomorrow she will marry poverty. A pair of teenagers giggled behind their phones. The guard looked bored and important at the same time. People love a lesson when they are not the ones learning. Margaret pushed through the door. "Grace, are you giving away uniform now? Do you want to represent us smelling like the street?" Her bracelets clacked. "Return it and wash your hands before you touch anything. Customers are complaining already." She glanced at the old man like he was a stain. "Move from our frontage." Mama Asha appeared with a mop and a neutral face. "Baridi kali," she said softly as she passed Grace. The mop bucket bumped Margaret's heel by accident or grace. The supervisor stepped aside with a hiss. "We have standards," she snapped, retreating. The old man touched the fabric, fingers reading it like braille. The weight of an empty hand is heavier than coins to those who have carried it. You lift it like a feather. Grace frowned at the phrasing, at the dignity that kept slipping through his disguise like light through a woven basket. Maybe you've given away something you needed and discovered you were warmer without it. Maybe you remember who held you up on a night like this. Grace took the bin back inside, hands numb, cheeks hot. Peter at table 4 lowered his phone, thumb hovering over post and then retreating. Not yet. The room hummed. Through the window, the sweater around the beggar glowed a dull red under the streetlight, a small ember against the evening. Her pocket buzzed. A text from Auntie Njeri. Hospital called. Samuel anaumwa tena. Need blood tomorrow. The letters froze her more than the wind. She looked from the message to the man in her sweater and back to the cash tips she did not have. Clouds gathered. The night tightened. By morning, the price of kindness would rise again.
Morning rose with a metallic sky and a text that wouldn't leave Grace's screen. Samuel needs blood, tomorrow. She tucked her mother's cross under her collar, breathed in steam from weak tea, and prayed, Bwana nishike mkono, Lord, hold my hand. Coins whispered in her palm, just enough for 2 matatus and a simple lunch. Or something else. At Java House, the machines hissed, Margaret's seals clicked, and the city pretended it could outrun worry. Outside, the blind stranger stood in his usual shadow, the cracked stick hooked over his wrist. He tilted his head toward the door like he could hear kindness before it arrived. Maybe you've weighed a coin and felt it judge you. Bus fare or medicine, food or favor. A choice that doesn't feel small at all. Grace served table after table, the tips light as dust. When a lull finally came, she slipped out with a paper bag and the coins she had counted twice. Mzee, she said, voice steady, leo ninakukununulia chakula. Today I am buying you a meal. She walked him toward a kiosk up the street, ordered ugali and sukuma wiki, and added a small cup of stew. The total ate her fare in one bite. He lifted his face as if to see it. You spend like someone who has counted the cost, he murmured. Not many do. The words felt like a hand on her shoulder, steady, too knowing. Rain began as a rumor, then a curtain. Grace watched drops stitch the pavement into a river and knew what it meant, a long walk home. She folded the flimsy paper around the hot food, pressed it into his hands, and laughed once. Kula kabla baridi ifike. Eat before the cold arrives. By closing, the sky had emptied itself. You're late to clock out, Margaret said, and don't think I didn't notice your charity rounds. You'll explain shortages if I find any. Grace signed the sheet, said nothing, and stepped into the wet. The railway line gleamed like a black vein. Mud clutched her shoes. She counted steps to keep fear small. Past the tin shacks, past the smoky fish stand, past boys who joked, "Eish, Madam Java, unatembea bila umbrella." She hugged herself and kept moving. The rain found her scalp and spine. Breath turned to fog. The cross warmed under her skin like a star. Halfway, a fever pricked. She remembered her mother's voice. When you have little, give from the middle, not the edge. That way it still costs love. She smiled in the dark. Maybe you've discovered that generosity hurts and heals in the same place. By the time Kibera's chorus rose, radios, laughter, a baby crying, her dress was heavy and her teeth chattered. Auntie Njeri opened the door, worry already formed. Umechelewa, baridi sana. You're late, so cold. Grace nodded, sent M-Pesa for Samuel's hospital deposit, and watched the balance fall toward zero. Kesho, nitapanda mapema. Tomorrow, I'll rise early. At dawn, she returned to work, throat raw, joints aching. The blind man waited, sweater still on his shoulders. He turned at her footsteps with practiced precision. "Good morning, Miss Wanjiru," he said, crisp, formal, as if announcing her. She froze. She had never told him her name. He smiled, and the rain seemed to listen.
The day began with a small shock. At the door, the blind stranger turned at the sound of her steps and said, "Good morning, Miss Wanjiru." Grace froze. She had never told him her name. Before she could ask how, the lunch rush crashed in. Orders, cups, coins, voices, all of it louder than her question. By noon, the staff meal sat on the pass, a modest plate set aside by Mama Asha. steam curling like a hand beckoning her to rest. Grace lifted it, meaning to take 2 bites in the corner and keep going. Then she saw him outside, shoulders folded against the sun, sweater, the one she had given, still wrapped around him. The cracked stick hung from his wrist. She carried the plate through the glass as if walking a tightrope over a crowd. Nze, kula, eat. She broke the chapati, cooled the stew, guided the spoon to his fingers. He smiled like a man invited to a table he had been watching from a distance. Asante binti, God sees. A heel struck the pavement. Margaret, perfume, bracelets, a voice that cut. Grace, what is this? Are you using company food to feed the street? She snatched the empty spoon from Grace's hand and held it up like evidence. We are not a charity. Hii michezo imeisha. This nonsense ends now. People turned. A couple near the window tilted their phones. One man laughed, short and mean. That girl will feed beggars until she becomes one. The guard smirked and looked away. Maybe you have stood in a circle like this, where every eye makes your skin smaller. Grace steadied her breath. She is hungry, she said. I was only sharing my meal. Margaret shook her head, enjoying the stage. You are paid to work, not to play savior. Customers are complaining about your behavior. You embarrass us. She stepped closer. Say sorry to the patrons and to management. Now! Grace's throat tightened. A hymn wanted to rise. Instead, she whispered, Pole. To him! Margaret snapped, pointing not at the man, but at the glass where the higher-paying customers watched. Apologize properly or leave. Silence held. Grace turned to the old man, met the blank of his eyes, and chose. Forgive me for the disturbance, Mzee. I did not mean to make a scene. He tilted his face to her voice, not to Margaret's command. Kindness does not apologize for itself, he murmured. But I accept. Margaret's mouth hardened. Enough. Hand in your apron. You're fired. Pack your things and get out. The word fired hung in the air like tear gas. A few people actually clapped. Another voice, thin, amused, said, Ati fired for feeding a beggar. Nairobi is wild. Laughter rolled and broke. Grace blinked and the world doubled for a second, hot and watery. She would not cry here. Mama Asha stepped to the doorway, eyes blazing under her headscarf. She did not speak. She did not need to. Grace unknotted her apron, folded it, and placed it on the counter with the care of a person laying down a flag. She slid her tip coins into her palm. They were light. She counted 250s, 100. 200 shillings. The number did its math on her rent, on Samuel's blood, on the thin edges of the week. She walked back out. Rain threatened, but not yet. The old man waited, hands folded over the sweater, listening. I have to go, she said. But first. She crossed to the kiosk she knew, ordered a hot plate of rice and beans with a spoon of stew, paid all 200 in a single sigh, and brought it back while it was still steaming. She put the food into his hands, guiding the container until he felt the weight of it. For you, she said, a proper lunch. He held it like a newborn. Around them, the city kept moving, unfazed by the small miracle happening at the curb. Margaret barked something about cleaning lockers. A car honked. Someone muttered, Hii ndio Nairobi. This is Nairobi. The old man leaned closer, voice low and steady as a drumbeat. You don't know what you've done for me. Grace nodded once, the cross warm against her skin. She turned, shoulders straight, and walked away into a future that for the moment looked like nothing at all. She did not see the black cars waiting in another part of town, engines cooling. She did not know that the next time she stepped on this pavement, people would stand, not to mock, but to make way. The next morning, Grace returned to Java House to clear her locker and thank Mama Asha. She expected silence and a signed form. Instead, engines murmured like distant thunder.
3 black Range Rovers slid to the curb, windows tinted, engines idling. Heads turned inside the glass, phones lifted. Peter was already recording before he knew why. The security guard straightened his tie. Margaret smoothed her blazer and stepped outside, ready to perform authority. A man in a navy suit exited the lead car, calm and precise, followed by 2 discreet security officers. He held a tablet, and a small earpiece flashed at his collar. "Good morning," he said, voice courteous but carrying. "I'm looking for Miss Grace Wanjiru." The patio went quiet, the way a headmaster enters. Margaret pointed to herself. "I am the supervisor here. How can I help you?" The man's smile stayed polite. "My name is James Mutiso," he said. "We would like to speak with Ms. Wanjiru if she's available." He looked past Margaret as if he already knew the answer. James's eyes found Grace by the door, small and steady in her worn shoes. "Ms. Wanjiru, kindly accompany me. You are safe." The words sounded official and strangely tender at once. Grace glanced at Mama Asha, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Margaret tried to step between them. "Any communication goes through me," she snapped. James's gaze did not move. "Madam Tafadhali, please. We will return Ms. Wanjiru shortly." He offered his arm to Grace the way one offers a hand to a person crossing a river. "Maybe you've been summoned into a room that felt like it wasn't built for you." The first step still mattered. As they reached the curb, Peter angled closer, camera low. "Sasa, Grace, you okay?" She managed a small smile. "Nico," she said, "I'm okay." The rear door opened with a soft seal break. Cool air kissed her face. Leather smelled like new books and rain. James guided her in, joined her, and the convoy pulled away with a hum that felt unreal. Westlands slid by, billboards, jacaranda, the morning line at the bank. The motorcade took Wayaki Way, dipped past Museum Hill, and merged onto Uhuru Highway. Boda-bodas parted like a school of fish. Grace's hands learned the softness of the seatbelt. Am I in trouble?" she asked. James shook his head. "No, Grace. Someone wishes to thank you." "For what?" "For being you." The answer sounded impossible and somehow familiar. She watched the city change texture. Uhuru Park lawns rinsed bright by last night's rain. Traffic pulsing like a heartbeat. The skyline arranging itself into a story she was not sure she belonged in. Maybe you've sat in a seat that made your world look like a map and wondered who plotted your route. She touched her mother's cross and thought of Samuel's laugh, Aunt Jerry's hands, and the weight of 200 shillings spent well. They turned in at the Serena Hotel. A doorman in a crisp coat said, "Karibu," and meant it, "welcome." Marble caught the light in clean angles. Fresh lilies lifted a cool fragrance under chandeliers that looked like quiet waterfalls. Grace's shoes made a shy sound on the floor. She wanted to turn around and run back to familiar dust, but James matched her pace. "You are doing well," he said, like a coach on the sideline. They passed portraits of statesmen and athletes, a hushed lounge where soft music threaded the air, and a corridor that opened to a ballroom. Through the doors, she glimpsed rows of chairs, a small stage, lights on stands, and a screen with 2 words, Ubuntu Initiative. Men and women in suits adjusted name tags. Microphones waited like curious birds. Her name did not belong among these letters, and yet, here it was, moving towards them. James stopped beside the double doors. "Please wait here," he said. "In a moment, someone will greet you." She nodded, palms damp, heart careful. On the other side, a murmur gathered, then quieted. She heard steps, measured, confident, and the soft click of a cane that did not sound broken. The air shifted, like a room inhaling before a song. A voice beyond the door said, "She's arrived." The handles turned, and light poured through.
The doors opened. James guided Grace into a ballroom washed in gold light. A low murmur swelled and stilled. On the stage, a lectern bore 2 words, Ubuntu Initiative. Cameras winked.
Nairobi suits and uniforms filled the seats, beside cleaners in crisp smocks and waiters in black. Someone had meant for all kinds of Kenyans to be here today. A man stepped forward, tall, in a charcoal Kitenga-tailored suit, dark glasses, a sleek white cane. The broken walking stick was gone. His presence bent the room toward him without noise. He touched the lectern, smiled slightly, and faced the sound of the crowd. "Good morning," he said. "My name is Dr. Kwame Osem Bonsu." The syllables settled like a bell. He did not rush. "I was born in Ghana, raised by a grandmother from Kisumu. Years ago, a car crash in Cape Town took my sight and gave me a mission. I built Msokoni with friends across this continent, but wealth means nothing if we are not, because others are. Ubuntu." Heads nodded. The word seemed to fit the chandelier light. "For 50 days, I walked our cities as a stranger. Lagos, Accra, Kigali, Kampala, Nairobi. I wore old clothes. I refused my cane. I listened to how we treat the unseen. I was not testing the poor. I was testing the rest of us." A few people inhaled at once. Maybe you've wondered who is watching when you think no one is. He lifted his chin. Only 3 people showed steady kindness, without cameras, without reward. In City 47, outside this very restaurant, one young woman taught me again what we mean when we say, "I am because we are." He turned his face toward Grace as if seeing through walls. "Grace Wanjiru, stand with me." James took her hand and led her to the stage. Her knees trembled. Her mother's cross felt heavier and brighter at once. She stopped beside him, small and steady. The room a sea of eyes and phones. Dr. Ose Bonsu's smile warmed. "My child, you are Ubuntu." He spoke to the room, but told her story. "You brought hot chai and a sweet mandazi when others looked away. You took off your sweater on a cold evening and wrapped it around me as if I were your uncle. You spent your transport money to buy ugali and sukuma wiki, then walked home in the rain. You gave me your staff meal and bore humiliation without bitterness. And on the day you were fired, you spent your last 200 shillings to buy me a proper lunch. Still, you blessed me." He paused. "You lifted me when you had every reason to hold on to yourself." Murmurs broke into soft applause, then steadied into silence. Margaret stood near the door, color draining, bracelet still. Peter's phone trembled slightly. His screen kept catching Grace's face and the billionaire's words together. Somewhere, hashtags were already being typed, but in this room, though, time moved in heartbeats. "I disguised myself, because the heart speaks most clearly when it believes no one is listening. I did not want to embarrass anyone. I wanted to witness us. Today, I will not expose cruelty. I will honor courage. This young woman's kindness was not an act. It was a habit." He tipped his head, and habits change nations. He shifted the cane, and the microphones caught a softer tone. "Grace, I cannot restore the years you have carried alone, but I can stand beside you now. I will help your brother find strength. I will open a door for your studies. I will make sure your aunt rests without fear, and I will invest in the dream you have been humming under your breath." Grace's hands flew to her mouth. Tears gathered, but did not fall. He turned back to the microphone. "Now, let me honor her."
Applause rolled across the ballroom as if the room finally exhaled. Dr. Ose Bonsu lifted a hand for quiet. "Now, let me honor her." He turned slightly toward Grace. "First, your brother Samuel.
Beginning next week, the Ubuntu initiative will fly him and his guardian to our partner hospital in India. His evaluation, treatment, and medicines are fully covered. A Kenyan nurse will accompany him from Kenyatta to Delhi and back. We will expedite passports, arrange housing near the hospital, and cover every cost until he is well enough to chase his dream. Grace's knees softened. She pictured Samuel in a bright ward that didn't echo, smiling without pain. Maybe you know what it is to hear hope read like a plan instead of a prayer. Second, he continued, your future. You will study hospitality management at Strathmore University on a full scholarship, tuition, books, and a living stipend. While you study, Serena Hotel will employ you part-time on a flexible schedule with mentorship from their senior team. You will learn service, leadership, and the business behind it. Grace touched her mother's cross. The word school felt like a window opening in a room she had thought was out of doors. Third, he said, voice warm, your home. Aunt Jerry will receive the keys to 2-bedroom apartment in Donholm this week. Rent and utilities for the first year are covered, and the title will be placed in your family's name after the program term. No more leaks, no more fear when the rain comes. Somewhere in the back, a woman dabbed her eyes and whispered, Asante. Thank you. Finally, he said, tipping his head toward the lights, your dream. You once told a friend you wished to start a small place that served hearty food at fair prices, where a person with 100 shillings could sit without shame. The Ubuntu Fund will invest seed capital and mentorship to launch your restaurant concept. You will choose the name. We will help you write the plan. Grace laughed through a breath. The railway kitchen, she said, surprising herself. Tracks had carried her. Now they would carry others. James stepped forward with a folder, letters on letterhead, a temporary stipend card, a simple contract for the Serena role. A hotel attendant approached with a small gift bag. Inside, folded and clean, lay the red sweater she had given away on a cold night. A note rested on top. Keep warm as you warmed me. She pressed the fabric to her chest. Some things return to you softer. Outside the ballroom, the city woke up to the story. Peter's video hit KOT within minutes. Grace at the curb, Margaret scolding, the Range Rollers, the reveal. Citizen TV cut in with a live ticker. NTV ran a banner. Kenyan Waitress chosen for Ubuntu initiative. International blogs picked it up before sunset. A familiar name tweeted a hat and the Kenyan flag. WhatsApp groups buzzed. Church aunties, schoolmates, co-workers. Have you seen this girl from Java? Maybe you've watched a life change on your phone and felt your own heart shift a little. Grace asked for a quiet corner and called Aunt Jerry on speaker. Tumepewa nyumba shosho, she said, voice shaking. We have been given a house, Grandma. Aunt Jerry sobbed, laughed, prayed all at once. Over the line, Samuel's thin voice broke in. Dada, ni kweli? Sister, is it true? She said, it is true. When they stepped back into the light, cameras slashed, but Grace kept her gaze steady and low. She thanked the staff by name. She hugged Mama Asha the way a daughter hugs news. She asked James to make sure the kitchen crew ate before the press did. It's funny how real power tastes like service when you've carried plates for years. Before the day ended, bouquets arrived, emails stacked, and a documentary team from Netflix Africa requested an interview. But ahead of all the noise, a small knot of worry found her again, familiar as breath. In a city that never forgets a spectacle, not everyone celebrates. And before the week was over, one more face would appear at her door, asking for a different kind of help. When the cameras cooled and flowers wilted, the real test began.
Grace shuffled between scholarship forms and early Serena shifts, reading contracts at the kitchen table while Aunt Jerry brewed tea. Online noise rose and fell. Errands returned to normal. But consequences, like seeds, germinated silently. People whispered. Screenshots passed between phones. Folks remembered what they saw and what they did not. The week after the reveal, Truth started walking toward place where pride strutted. At the restaurant, head office opened an audit. The tip jar did its own accounting. Receipts would not align. A manager arrived without a smile and left with files. 2 staff quietly confirmed what everyone suspected. Small amounts had been skimmed for months. Margaret was suspended, then dismissed for cause. Her jewelry stopped singing. Doors stopped holding for her. For the first time, she had to stand in a room and not be feared anymore. On Wednesday evening, a knock rose at Grace's new door in Dunholm. She opened to find Margaret on the landing, rain stitched into her coat, eyes smaller than her voice had ever allowed. No bracelets, no perfume. She held an envelope with 2 hands. "I came to say sorry," she said, breath thin, "and to ask for help." The last word scraped pride on its way out, like metal against concrete in the evening air. Grace remembered the sidewalk, the laughter, the word fired hanging like smoke. Forgiveness did not feel simple. She stepped aside. Tea steamed, silence settled. Then she spoke the way her mother might have. Mercy is not weakness. Lakin mercy needs truth. She offered conditions: a written apology to staff, a repayment schedule for the stolen tips, and training without a title. If you agree, join our pilot at Railway Kick-In in Kibera. Learn service from floor. Launch day looked like a feast and a choir. Giant sufurias steamed, women stirred ugali with strong arms. A banner read, "Karibu, Railway Kitchen, pay what you can." Youth from Kibera lined up for free skills classes, food safety, customer care, cash integrity. Aunt Jerry checked produce weights with a grin. Mama Asha tied her headscarf and took the pass. She said, "Tuanze." The line moved, laughter rose like steam. Children ate without hurrying, eyes wide. Margaret arrived before dawn, hair pulled back, eyes open. She stood on a plastic stool and faced former co-workers and new trainees. "I was wrong. I took what was not mine. I shamed someone who fed me with her kindness. I will repay every shilling." She handed Peter, volunteering on operations, an envelope, signed apology, repayment plan, first installment in cash. People exhaled, some nodded. Accountability had found a chair beside mercy at last. Grace nodded once. "Start at the welcome table. Learn names. Count change with someone watching." Beside them, Mama Asha coached a shy trainee. "Sahani is your smile. Let it look like respect." By month's end, 3 trainees had café jobs. A 4th launched a chapati stand. Peter built a simple website. Samuel's video arrived from India, voice stronger. Aunt Jerry managed suppliers like a general. Gossip turned to pride in the lane today. On a quiet evening, Grace and Margaret stood by the door, breathing stew and wood smoke. "Asante kwa nafasi," Margaret said. "Thank you for the chance." Grace smiled. "Repay the team, train the next you. That will be enough." The street felt lighter. Maybe this is Ubuntu after microphones leave. A table, a ledger, a lesson, and hands held out both ways. Before you go, there is something I want to tell you directly, very soon.
Dear listener, as we leave Grace at the doorway of the railway kitchen and Samuel on a path toward health, I want to speak to you for a moment. Nairobi moves fast, so does the world. We budget our coins, our time, our attention.
Most days, the easiest thing is to look away. Yet one small act from a tired waitress crossed a street, a city, and an ocean. If you have ever felt unseen, remember, your kindness does not need an audience to be real, and it may already be traveling farther than you think. Maybe you carry your own version of Samuel's hospital call, or Aunt and Jerry's worry, or a Margaret in your life who made you smaller. If that's you, hold this close. You are allowed to keep your dignity and still be generous. Ubuntu isn't a slogan, it's a daily choice. I am because we are. The little you share from the middle of your need can become the bridge someone else walks across. Tonight, when you pass someone on your street, on a train, outside a shop, ask yourself, what can I give that still leaves me honest? It might be a meal, a sweater, a ride, a message, a prayer. It might be a second chance. And yes, someone might be watching, but that is not why it matters. The heart you practice in secret becomes the life you live in public. I'd love to hear what this story stirred in you. What did you learn from Grace, from Dr. Osei Bonsu, from Margaret's apology? Share it in the comments and tell us the one small act you'll try this week. If this story touched you, tap subscribe, like, and share it with a friend who needs hope today. The more we spread these moments, the more common they become. And keep your eyes open. The Ubuntu initiative is still moving, and the next door might open on your street. Somewhere, a quiet kindness is about to surprise the world again. It could be yours. See you in the next story.